Okay, so it's been a minute since we last officially sat down and talked about Cable on the channel. And I really mean more his solo book because the last time we had a focus on Cable in his solo book was back in Operation Zero Tolerance. And then after that, we have been covering all these different types of X-Men books. X-Men, Excalibur, we even covered X-Force. We have not sat down and officially talked about Cable in a good minute. And so I kind of want to sit down and cover this storyline that does pick up right after Operation Zero Tolerance for Cable. And that would be the Hellfire Hunt. I almost said the wrong word there. But the Hellfire Hunt for me personally is a great storyline because it continues the whole idea of the war Cable has with Apocalypse and trying to, well, save his future. But that leads us over to the character known as Irene Merriweather. Now, when it comes to Irene Merriweather, she works for a newspaper company, but not the Daily Bugle. And the reason why I'm bringing that up because she does tell us right off the bat that she has been trying her best to work at the Daily Bugle, but unfortunately, she has not been accepted. Now, the company she does work for is more like a usual tabloid magazine, but in a newspaper style. And so she's kind of getting bored there. But she does get a new assignment. That assignment is to figure out who is Sebastian Shaw, like get information about him. Now, for me personally, that right there is really important because it shows that for Sebastian Shaw, even though he has all the money and all the power, most people in the public don't know who he is. Now, for her boss, he also wants to know about the redhead girl with Sebastian. Now, we already know that is Madeline Pryor. But her main goal right now is figure out who is Sebastian and the redhead girl that he is with. And that leads into Irene going to different types of contacts who may or may not know about Sebastian. Here's the thing, because all these different contacts she has, they play a role in like different fields of society. You know, the rich society, or a police officer, or a record keeper. But when it comes to all these different people, once she does mention the name Sebastian Shaw, they all act the same way, kind of like they know about him, but they're telling her they don't know about him, trying to make sure that his name does not come out of their mouths at all. But she does have one contact who is kind of able to give her some information. And that would be Mickey. Now, when it comes to Mickey, he had worked at one of those like events the Hellfire Club was throwing. And so while working at that event, he ran into Sebastian, but also overheard a conversation Sebastian was having with another guy, better known as Donald Pierce. Now, for Mickey, at first, he wasn't really able to give Irene enough information. And the reason why, because, well, he's drunk. And so with him being drunk, he's not really able to remember everything he heard from the party at the moment. Now, once you do have Irene being able to get back to her office, you do have her boss kind of get upset that she doesn't have anything for him yet. But once she does get to her desk, well, then she gets a call from Mickey. And Mickey says, hey, listen, I do remember something. Like Sebastian Shaw and that Pierce guy talked about going after Cable. Now, for Irene, she has no idea what that means. We do, but she does not. And so her goal is to head over to where Mickey lives, kind of get more information out of him. But that begins the process of everything going south for Irene. And the reason why, because when she gets to Mickey's apartment, he's dead. Like he is gone. And so she begins to freak out and kind of wondering what in the you know what did she step into. Except when she gets back to her newspaper company, they're all dead. Like every single person who worked there has been killed off. Her boss is also gone as well. And so she begins to freak out even more. And so her main goal, again, is to get the heck out of there. Except then she's now being followed by different members of the Hellfire Club, like different soldiers who work for the organization. And the reason why, because, well, she was getting a little too close, learning more about Sebastian Shaw. And so the rest of the first chapter is really more her just trying her best to survive. But luckily for her, at the very last second, some help does come. The help would be Cable. And so as you jump into the next chapter, it's really more of Cable now kind of giving Irene all the information she basically needs to know when it comes to like what was going on with her in the last chapter, the idea of the Hellfire Club. And for her, she never heard of the Hellfire Club. And so to hear Cable say like, hey, you know what? You were attacked by Sebastian Shaw and also Donald Pierce and their crew from the Hellfire Club. And that right there really shows again, the Hellfire Club is not really well known to the public. But on top of that, when it comes to the Hellfire Club, is Cable telling her about the inner circle as well. He also tells her about himself, like, hey, I am a hero, but not part of the Avengers, not a part of any superhero team except for like X-Force and the X-Men family because I am a mutant, but also I'm from the future. And so for her, she's just trying her best to collect all the information that he's just throwing at her all at once. Now, when it comes to Cable, he also does mention that when it comes to Donald Pierce and also Sebastian Shaw in the Hellfire Club, they're kind of working on a brand new project, something called the Tomorrow Agenda. But the problem is for Cable, he has no idea what that could possibly be. And so now it's time for Cable to work with Irene, really more protect her, until he is kind of able to learn more about the Tomorrow Agenda. But let's not forget that when it comes to the Hellfire Club, the actual club part of the organization is just a front. The inner circle is a group of people that were handpicked to come together, to work together, to hopefully and slowly dominate the entire world, control the entire world behind the scenes. But anyways, we do pick up with Donald Pierce, and Donald Pierce is part of the inner circle. And so when it comes to Donald Pierce at the moment, he was given over control of the Tomorrow Agenda by Sebastian Shaw. Here's the catch though, because he does not know everything about the Tomorrow Agenda, because for Sebastian, he's not really trying to give all that info over to Donald Pierce just yet. But for Donald Pierce, he does get word about Cable appearing in a different part of the world. And so you have Donald Pierce say, finally, my other goal is to get rid of Cable once and for all. So let's go ahead and head out now, and hopefully we can get rid of him. Now for Cable, he was technically able to build his own like secret organization known as the Believers, where he met different people over the years who also believe in the future like Cable does. And so one of the Believers were able to set up a hologram of Cable to kind of have Donald Pierce and his crew leave his home to allow Cable and also Irene to sneak into the actual building. Really more Cable. But once you do have Cable being able to get inside the home of Donald Pierce, you then have Cable find a character known as Taft. Now, for Taft, he's holding on to information that Cable needs to kind of help him understand about what's going on with the Tomorrow Agenda. The problem is that while you have Cable trying to collect that information from Taft, kind of force it out of him, you didn't have Paladin arrive. Now, for Paladin, he's a character that we have talked about a few times when it came to our coverage over different things in Marvel Comics, especially back in Shadowland. But when it comes to Paladin, he's kind of like this hire mercenary. You can hire him for different kind of jobs, but either way right now, the Hellfire Club hired Paladin to protect the place. And so for Paladin, his main goal is to bring down Cable, which honestly is not an easy task. Because you do have Cable, being able to get rid of Paladin and also the other Hellfire Club agents that came with Paladin. And so once that was handled, you then had Cable shift his focus back over to Taft, who's holding on to information possibly about the Tomorrow Agenda. The problem is that while you have Cable turn around, he realized Taft took something to begin the process of killing himself. And so now Taft is dying in the arms of Cable. And you have Cable try to use his abilities as a way to hold the mind of Taft together to prevent the idea of death. The problem is Taft still dies in the arms of Cable. And so after his death, and because Cable's mind was connected to Taft's mind, he felt all the emotions of death. And so right now, he needs a quick breather. But once you have Cable being able to collect himself, he then begins to talk to Irene about what he had learned about the whole idea of the Hellfire Club. And so you have Cable say, listen, I now know what Tomorrow Agenda is all about. It's the idea of apocalypse. You see, somebody had contacted the inner circle. That person has information about the far future and kind of told the inner circle about something really powerful they could use as a way to kill off apocalypse. Because for the inner circle, they believe they have the ability to harness the power of apocalypse. And the thing is, that's not truthfully possible. And so for Cable, he now knows he has to chase after the Hellfire Club before they make things worse for the entire world. Now, you do have Cable go over to pay a visit to Cyclops and, well, Jean Grey. Now, this does take place, like I said earlier, post Operation Zero Tolerance. And the reason why I'm bringing that back up again, because when it came to Operation Zero Tolerance, Cyclops had a bomb placed inside his body. But at this point, Dr. Reyes was able to remove the bomb from his body. So he should be a-okay, but needs time to recover. And so for Jean Grey, she wants to take Cyclops over to Alaska to give him the chance to technically recover. Now, while you do have those two characters in the room at School of Charles Xavier getting ready to leave, you have Cable come by to pay them a visit, to say goodbye. Because for Cable, he has been working really hard to stop kind of pushing Cyclops away and allow Scott Summers to be in his life. Because again, Scott Summers is, well, Cable's father. And so for Cable, he is trying his best to let Jean Grey in as well to be his mother, even though technically Madeline Pryor is his mother. But it's him saying goodbye to both Cyclops and Jean Grey, but not really telling them what's going on when it comes to his next mission. And also the fact that X-Force is now technically on their own, as we saw in our last X-Force video. Now we kind of get a small flashback here, and we jump back to 1865, I want to say. Anyway, we do pick up in London, sorry, 1859, but we do jump back in time that year in London, and we pick up with Apocalypse. Now, this is Apocalypse right now, beginning the process of bringing in his harbinger, because he knows in the future that there's going to be a time where the world going to be tested. Because remember, for Apocalypse, he believes in the whole idea of survival of the fittest. The strong may live, the weak may die, the strong may lead, the weak must follow. And so he believes in the far future, there'll be a time where the world is going to be tested by him, but first he needs his harbinger to begin the test. This random guy that he is currently putting inside this chamber to slumber until the right time comes. And so now we switch over to the present day. Now, when we do, we pick up with Sebastian and also, well, Donald Pierce. Now, for Donald, this is a guy who's been looking for answers, because for Sebastian, he put Donald in charge of the Tomorrow Agenda, but for Donald, he does not know everything about the Tomorrow Agenda. It's a guy right now who's just looking for answers. He wants to know, like, what is the actual plan for the Tomorrow Agenda? And so you have Sebastian say, fine, let me go ahead and show you what you have been missing. And so you have the two characters go underground the manor they're in right now. And once they do reach the lowest level, we kind of find out that Sebastian had found the same chamber that we just saw when it came to Apocalypse in that flashback. And of course, they find that guy inside the chamber who was locked away by Apocalypse, who's supposed to become the harbinger for Apocalypse. Now, this guy has slept since then, but it's right now Sebastian saying like, hey, listen, so my scientists have been working their best to figure out how to open the actual chamber. And the thing is the day to finally open it and use that power out of there to defeat Apocalypse and then take control of what Apocalypse owned, to take his power away. Now, for Donald Pierce, he does ask the right question here. How do you know that today is the right day to open up that chamber and use that person as a way to bring down Apocalypse? And that would be because of Shivari. Now, Shivari is a character really haven't talked a lot about, but he is truly connected to Cable, Strife, Apocalypse. Like, he is truly connected. Let me explain. And really, I'm only going to focus on the first half of his origin. When it comes to Shivari, he's also from the far future where Cable came from, where he was raised in, of course, with the Ascani clan as well. And for Shivari, he was part of the clan. Now, for the Ascani clan, they believe in the whole idea of preserving the timeline, meaning that nobody is allowed to go back in time to change the past to alter the future. But when it came to Shivari, he kind of felt like they should go back in time, get rid of Apocalypse to hopefully bring in a better future. And so for Shivari, he went back in time and tried to achieve that goal to get rid of Apocalypse. This leads up to this point right here, where you have Shivari right now working with the Hellfire Club and kind of hoping to use his knowledge of Apocalypse, but also his future weapons to kind of help the Hellfire Club to find a way to defeat Apocalypse. But now we're given another flashback. Now, in this other flashback, we jump back to 1915. Now, in 1915, we pick up with a character known as Harry Manor. Now, Harry Manor is really important for the whole idea of, well, the storyline. Not the whole idea, but he does play a major role into it. Let me explain. You see, when it came to Apocalypse in that chamber, it was underground. Harry had built his home right above the actual spot where Apocalypse had placed the chamber. And so in the present day, when it came to Sebastian and Donald Pierce being inside that home belonged to Harry back in 1915. And for Harry, he was the Black King of the inner circle of the Hellfire Club back then. When it came to Harry, he has been trying his best to open up that chamber back then. But with him trying, word got out to the public and, of course, over to some different government agencies. And so that brought in Union Jack, because for him, he wanted to try his best to protect his country. And he believed that Harry was working with the enemies of the UK at that time in World War I. But technically, that was not true. For Harry, what he was trying to do is use whatever was inside that chamber to make profit. And so once you had Jack find out what Harry was trying to do, it did kind of lead into a battle. Harry died in that battle, but for Jack, he realized that he was unable to open up the chamber. So he technically left it there alone and said, you know what, I'll come back for it later, but he never did. But getting back over to the present day, we now pick up with Cable and also Irene. Now, for Irene and Cable, they're kind of arguing about the idea of her going with him on this next mission to hopefully bring down, Sebastian and the Hellfire Club. Now, at first, for Cable, he does not want to bring her. He wants to leave her behind in one of his safe houses as a way to protect her. But for Irene, that's not okay at all. She has to go with them. And of course, he agrees then. But then they're confronted by Madeline Pryor. Now, for Madeline Pryor, around this time in Marvel Comics, she was connected to the Hellfire Club. She was connected to Sebastian Shaw. Now, for Cable, he knows that his mother is really evil at this point in time in Marvel Comics. But for Madeline, she does not agree in the whole idea of what Sebastian is trying to do. And so she tried to tell Cable, like, hey, listen, I'm here to help you. And I do know that you look at me as this evil person. And yes, I am evil, but not as evil as Sebastian. And so then she hands over this journal. Now, this journal belonged to Union Jack. Inside that journal holds information that could help Cable to locate where the chamber is technically at, to allow him the chance to stop Sebastian and also Donald Pierce. Now, I'm going to go ahead and skip a few pages for this chapter alone and kind of get into the point where you do have Cable arrive where Sebastian and also Donald Pierce are at. Now, when you do have Cable arrive there, well, that is when you have them all being able to, well, open up the chamber. And here comes the harbinger of Apocalypse. Now, I'm going to tell you guys right now, This character does kind of get wasted, I feel like, when it came to Marvel Comics. You'll see what I mean in future storylines down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. But when it comes to Harbinger of Apocalypse, once you have Cable arrive there as well, you have the Harbinger just begin to attack everyone in that room. Now, you do have Cable also try his best to battle against the guy. But the thing is, this guy has been evolved by Apocalypse, and not just physically, but also mentally as well. Because once you have him being able to defeat Cable and really show that Cable powers are nowhere near to his powers at all, he basically tells everyone in that room, like, hey, listen, it's now time for me to bring in a new era. It's now time for me to bring a change into this world. And I'm kind of wondering who will be able to adapt to that change. And then he officially leaves the room. Now, you do have Cable being able to locate Harbinger later on. Now, once he does, the two characters, they do have a small conversation with one another. Now, this conversation is really more of Cable trying his best to understand Harbinger, because Harbinger says that he was awake. He was awake inside that chamber the entire time. But while being inside that chamber, he was aware of everything going on around him, even though technically you had Apocalypse changing him physically and mentally, turning him into the Harbinger of Apocalypse. Now, is him also saying that even though Apocalypse had created him to bring chaos and destruction to this world, he does not know if technically he is ready for that just yet. And matter of fact, he says, listen, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to travel across the world and judge the human race. If I feel like they are going the wrong direction, then I'm going to follow the orders that were given to me by Apocalypse. But if I feel like they're going the right direction, they have earned the second chance to survive. And hopefully, with that second chance, it will lead into something beautiful for the entire world. And so, this is where he exits the book for a few more story arcs and comes out again to fight against Cable. But while he is leaving, he does tell Cable this right here. He says, you should go out of your way and find the ones who had released me, because they are truly evil. So now it's Cable kind of getting back on track and trying his best to find Sebastian and also, well, Donald Pierce. And so you have Cable go back to that chamber. Now, when he does, he finds this tracking device that was created by the Hellfire Club. They were trying their best to use the Harbinger of Apocalypse as a way to track Apocalypse. And so once they were releasing him out of his chamber, they were also able to locate where Apocalypse could possibly be at. And so now their main goal is to go over to that location to hopefully get rid of Apocalypse. But you also now have Cable knowing where they're heading to next, leading into the second half of this storyline. Now, the fourth chapter, issue number 51, really does kind of pick up with the idea of Cable still trying his best to track down the information of where Shaw and the rest of his crew had went to, even though technically at the end of the 50th issue, we kind of saw that Cable was able to figure out where they went to. Now, when it comes to Irene, she does begin to argue with Cable about going with him. Now, for Cable, he's kind of like, listen, we're hitting a whole new level of dangerous now, because they're now trying to go over to the lair of Apocalypse. I can't promise that I will protect you. Now, for Irene, she says hey, I showed you that I can handle myself. I got this. Even though technically in the storyline, she hasn't done much yet. But you do have Cable agree to bring her with him. And of course, it does lead into a situation where it's now Cable trying his best to survive while trying to protect Irene from an army of members of the Hellfire Club, soldiers left behind by Sebastian and also Donald Pierce. Now, for Cable, he's technically able to hold his own, but the problem is that he also has to watch over Irene. Now, you do get the point where you do have Cable and Irene trying their best to get away from the actual battle and hide somewhere. But then they run into this old fellow. And the only thing he says to Cable and also Irene that his name is Wilhelm. Now, apparently, he knows a lot about Cable, but not really trying to give away information about him, but also like how he knows a lot about Cable. Now, you do have Wilhelm take Cable and also Irene over to his home where they can hide for the time being until Cable is technically able to go after Sebastian and also Donald. Now, you do have Cable kind of wondering, like, who is this guy? Because the old man does tell Cable that he is a believer. And remember, believers are people who work with Cable because they believe in the future, a better future. But the problem is that Cable knows all the believers that he has met over the years. This one right here, Cable has no idea who this guy is. Now, after a few hours have passed by, you then have Cable decide to use his abilities to help him read the mind of Wilhelm to kind of figure out like who this guy truly is. Now, for Irene, she had just learned about the idea of Cable using his mind to communicate with other people, to read other people's minds. And so once she had learned that, for Irene, she hates the idea of Cable going into the guy's mind without his permission to learn who he is. But for Cable, they don't have a choice here. And so you have Cable go ahead and use his powers. And this is a callback to another character from the early days of Marvel Comics. We do learn that this guy is Masterman. Now, in the opening pages of the 5th chapter is really more used to kind of help us explain a tad bit more about the origin of Shivari. And technically, we already know about his origin because, well, I said it earlier. You see, it's the idea that in the opening pages of the 5th chapter, we see that when he arrived in the past, it was like 30 years in the past, and he was found by some monks. Now, the monks were able to help him recover, but once he did wake up, he had this message sent to him from the far future from a character known as Sanctity. And the thing is, she informed Shivari that his goal is to have Apocalypse and also Cable confront one another. That is his main goal when it comes to him being in the past. And so as we switch over to the present day, is him now kind of wondering what he did was the right thing to do by working with Sebastian and also, well, Donald Pierce to have the two characters, Apocalypse and also Cable, meet one another. Now, let's go ahead and briefly talk about Masterman. Now, Masterman first appeared in Giant Size Invaders issue number, I want to say 1, back in 1975. Now, when it comes to Masterman, he was a super soldier, but for the Nazis. And matter of fact, he was not the only one. There was two of them. There was him and Warrior Woman. And technically, they were supposed to marry one another. Anyways, by the end of the war, you had Strucker go out of his way to kind of put both super soldiers in suspended animation, kind of keep them on ice for the time being, because Strucker, he knew that Hitler's, whole game plan was going to fall apart. Now, fast forward a few years, you did have Masterman wake up in a Namor book. By the end of that battle in that book, Masterman fell down into the sewers. Now, he was defeated, but he also realized that his powers were slowly going away. And with his powers slowly going away, of course, he began to age. And so ever since that moment, he has been trying to turn his life around. And so as we do switch back over to the present day, it's really more him trying to plead to Cable, saying like, dude, listen, all I want to do is like help you. Because for Masterman, he knows that there's no way for him to be forgiven for what he had did back in World War II, the countless people that he has killed. But at the same time, before he passed, he still wants to do some kind of good and help out Cable, because he has the equipment to help Cable out to locate where Sebastian and also as his crew is currently at. And so for Cable, even though he does technically hate this guy for what he has done back in World War II, this is war. He has to use Masterman's equipment to help him find the lair that belongs to Apocalypse. Now, for Irene, she does express the idea that she does not like this at all. But for Cable, again, this is war. They don't really have a choice here. And so he does use her power, not hers, he does use his powers to put her to sleep, to keep her asleep long enough to allow him and also Masterman to sneak out and go ahead and follow Sebastian and to hopefully bring him down. And speaking of Sebastian, we do see him and the rest of his crew right now arrive what could be the lair of Apocalypse. Now, when they do arrive, they do fall into one of the traps that were placed by Apocalypse to make sure that nobody would get into his lair. And so the small army that Sebastian and Donald had put together, they're being attacked from all different types of angles. And right now, they're just trying their best to survive. Now, for Cable and also for Masterman, they're on their way over to where they can find Sebastian and the rest of his crew. Now, on the way over there, you have Masterman tell Cable, like, listen, so I met a believer. When I met that believer, it turned me into a believer as well for a better future, a better world for everybody. Now, with that being said, it's also him trying to tell Cable that what he has been trying to do is do good in the world to make up for the wrongs he did in the past. But the problem is for Cable, he says, dude, when you die, your soul is going to be judged. Your history, everything you did in the past is still going to be attached to you no matter what. So you may tell me that you are trying to be a better person and turn your life around. But the problem is that your past is still there. Now, it's also him kind of mentioning the fact that Cable has the ability to wipe people's mind. But for Cable, he says, there's no way I'm going to use my abilities to wipe your mind to help you forget all the bad things you did in the past. Now, while you have the two guys talking to one another, they do get attacked by some members of the Hellfire Club. But this kind of leads into the death of Masterman, because while you have Cable trying his best to fight against the agents who work for the Hellfire Club, well, for Cable, he almost got shot. But at the very last second, Masterman saved his life by taking the shot for him. Now, once you had Cable being able to deal with all the different guys who work for the Hellfire Club, you have Masterman say, like, listen, this is my time, but before I pass, you need to know this right here. Remember, your actions build your legacy. That right there is really important. And technically, he is right. But you have Cable having to bury Masterman in the snow. But now it's time for Cable to continue on and to hopefully find Sebastian. And really, the last page of this chapter is the Hellfire Club about to break into the lair that belongs to Apocalypse. And so as we enter the final chapter of this storyline, we're now kind of getting into the idea of seeing, well, Sebastian and his crew being able to get inside the actual lair of Apocalypse. Now, once they do make it inside the actual lair, you didn't have Sebastian and also Donald Pierce believe that all the technology that was left behind by Apocalypse is there for the taking, because they do realize Apocalypse is not there at all. Now, for Donald and also Sebastian, they're kind of tired of one particular person, and that would be Chiveri, because when he did contact Sebastian and also Donald Pierce in the past, it was very mysterious, right? And so they're kind of wondering what kind of secrets he's holding on to. But while you have all three characters talking to one another, you have Cable appear. Now, once Cable does appear, he makes it well known that knowing Apocalypse, even though he's no longer here, he'll make sure this base is no longer able to be used by anybody at all, especially when it comes to possible enemies down the road that Apocalypse might face, like Sebastian and also, well, Donald Pierce. And that is when you have the entire place going to shake. And the reason why, because for Apocalypse, he plans on blowing this place up. Now, with all that being said, for Sebastian, he does grab Chiveri and put inside one of the chambers that belongs to Apocalypse and gets locked inside that chamber. Now, with him being locked in there, that basically means just like the Harbinger of Apocalypse, he'll be in some kind of sleep for who knows how long. Now, with all that being said, you did have both Sebastian and Donald Pierce being able to get outside the base, but also Cable as well. And this kind of leads into a short battle where you do have Donald Pierce try his best to kill off Cable to get revenge against Cable, but Cable wins again. So Donald Pierce, dude, just stop. But anyways, you didn't have Sebastian Shaw be Cable's next target. But then you have Sebastian remind Cable like, hey, let's not forget about Shivari. He's still inside the base right now, locked away one of those pods. You should probably go out of your way and, I don't know, save his life. And so you have Cable try to get back inside to save Shivari's life. Now, Shivari is not going to be able to get out of the pod in time, but he does tell Cable this right here, that he is from the future, that basically he had a mission to help out Cable, and that's all Cable is able to get from him before you have Shivari fly in the air with the rest of the base and gets blown up. Now, we're kind of left to believe Shivari is dead, but that's not the case at all. Now, with the place getting blown up in the sky, across the world, you have Apocalypse, Ozymandias, and also Caliban see the place get blown up. Now, for Apocalypse, this is a sign that now the beginning of the end is here. A new age has arrived for Earth. And so for Apocalypse, it's now time for him to make the right moves. But he must go alone on his next part of his journey, not with Ozymandias or Caliban on his side or by his side. Now, he does tell Caliban that, hey, I'll see you in the future, but Ozymandias, I am done with you. And you didn't have Apocalypse walk away, leaving us wondering what's to come down the road for, well, the X-Men. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.